Well, it took longer than expected, but what say we get this Fire Emblem Fates marathon rolling, people? And seeing how I've just beaten Conquest, I feel the first thing I should discuss is what I find to be the best part of any Fire Emblem game, the characters. Oh man, I must say Fates, you've really done a great job with the characters just from Conquest alone. The Conquest, or in this case Nohr characters, are not only very fun, interesting, unique and well developed characters, but they're also great units on the battlefield, some of which being some of the best units in their respective classes, and offer interesting perspectives on the situation surrounding the story of Fates, helping to show the moral grade Fates and Fire Emblem in general is known for. I may have only discovered and got to experience these characters recently, but the Nohr characters are really good characters even by Fire Emblem standards, and some of them are candidates for my favourite characters in the series as a whole, and I can't wait to see what they're like in Birthright and Revelations. So as promised, to start off this marathon, it's time to decide which of the 10 units from Nohr are my favourite and worthy of riding together with me in this conquest to satisfy all of my subscribers, for the next 20 to 30 minutes. Now there's just a few things to clear up before we begin. First off, as always, this is just my opinion, and like with every Fire Emblem characters list I've done, while I will be acknowledging their use in the battlefield and taking it into account when judging each character, what matters most to me in any Fire Emblem game is the characters themselves and their supports, so bear that in mind when I rank each of these characters. Secondly, is that I'm looking at the characters that are exclusive to the Conquest storyline and judging them in terms of Conquest alone, rather than how they are in Birthright and Revelations because I haven't played them yet. So characters like Corrin, Azura, Kaze, and Felicia won't be on here. Thirdly is that I won't be including any child units in this countdown because they're going to get a list of their own at some point, so I'd rather not mix the two into a single list, but rather give all of you more videos to watch. And finally, I'm not looking at NPCs or bosses, just the characters you can use in Conquest and Conquest alone, and also this goes without saying, but no amiibo characters. And with all that cleared up, what say we get the proverbial ball rolling and start this long overdue marathon you've all been so excited to see. Well then, my brave soldiers, it's time for us to tackle Fire Emblem Fates one video at a time. For the future, for my subscribers, for the glory of Nohr! Have you ever heard of the term "don't judge a book by its cover," or appearances can be deceiving? Since what's seen at face value may not always reflect what's inside or portray the true essence of what's being shown to you. For example, there might be a girl who looks very young, naive and helpless, who in actuality is much older, smarter and deadlier than what she looks like. One such character goes to number 10 on this list, Nyx. Man, talk about starting off on the wrong foot, since despite me putting Nyx at number 10, I heard everyone going on about how Nyx sucks and that she wasn't worth using at all. Well, I don't know about you guys, but when I used Nyx, she was a pretty damn good unit despite being very 50-50 at times, which I'll cover in a second. And Nyx is a very interesting character, with some strong supports that really help her character to grow and flesh out her rather tragic backstory. Nyx first appears in Chapter 9 of Conquest, and at first Corrin mistakes her for a young girl. Nyx then bitterly explains that she accidentally placed a curse on herself that prevents her body from aging, and in fact she's much older than Corrin. In fact, she might just be one of the oldest members in the entire team. Nyx herself is very intelligent, wise and mature, so don't let her appearance fool you. But with that said, Nyx is also very bitter and reclusive towards others, and is overall a very pessimistic person due to her powers getting the better of her and placing the curse upon her. As such, Nyx feels that all of her actions are her atonement for cursing herself, whether they be good or bad. Her supports help to flesh out her backstory, as well as coming to terms with who she is and how she can live with being cursed. A good example being Leo's support, where he uses his magic to see Nyx in her true form and explains that she shouldn't constantly beat herself up over what's happened. Gameplay wise, Nyx is what I like to call a proverbial glass cannon, in the sense that 50% of the time, Nyx could absolutely destroy the enemy and decimate them in a single hit, and other times, Nyx couldn't hit for shit and would die at the drop of a hat. This is mainly due to her stats and growth rates as well as her being a dark mage, since Nyx has incredible magic stats, speed and resistance, allowing her to deal some serious damage with her tomes, double enemies easily and tank magical hits like they were nothing, which made her extremely potent against enemies with low resistance or those who dealt magical attacks. On the other hand, she had very low skill, luck and defense, making it so that she had trouble landing hits against faster enemies, and if hit by a decently powerful physical attack, she would shatter like glass, hence the term glass cannon. Despite being a rather 50-50 unit, Nyx was still a great character and a great unit to use throughout Conquest. While not someone I could always rely on, when it mattered most, she delivered on every occasion, and Nyx herself is one of the more tragic and complex characters in Conquest. She may seem cutesy and childlike on the outside, but don't let her appearance deceive you, because Nyx is no one to mess around with. When it comes to Fire Emblem, Beast units, Lagoos, Monarchites, or whatever you want to call them, are units that I'm pretty cool with. I mean, they're not my favourite units in the series or ones I use all the time, but I'm down with using them on occasion and they can work great in my team in just about any game. In the case of Conquest, a Beast unit turned up in Chapter 14, and at that point I wasn't sure if I wanted to add a new member to my team, but after using him, I was more than happy to welcome Keaton to the pack. Nothing like a bit of primal power when you're trying to conquer an entire nation. Yes, at number 9 on this list we have Keaton, a unit that probably wouldn't have made it on the team if he didn't kick so much ass in the chapter he debuted in and then on afterwards. Not to cut Keaton short or anything, I think he's a good character and very likeable, but if it wasn't for his use on the battlefield, I probably would have dismissed him since Conquest does not fuck around and there is no room for underleveled units in that game. Keaton first appeared in Chapter 14 of Conquest during the Opera House battle after Azura displayed her magical waterbending powers. While lost at first and trying to find his way back to the mountain, he runs into Corin, who at first is taken aback by his appearance, but then decides to add Keaton to his harem, team. Keaton himself is a bit of an oddball. I mean, he's a rather nice guy and tries his best to impress others and act all tough and cool, but often Keaton finds joy in things most people find nasty or creepy, as well as being rather sensitive and reluctant to admit his true feelings. His supports emphasize this since with Corin, Keaton tries to impress him with gifts, but constantly assures him that he just happens to have it on him, and with Selena, he constantly tries to one-up her and prove that he's the best at what he does. Gameplay wise, Keaton is a physical beast, pardon the pun, and one of the best tanks you can get in Conquest, which is certainly saying a lot, trust me. Being a beast unit, Keaton has high levels of strength, defense and speed, making him great at dealing a lot of damage, tanking physical hits and rarely getting doubled by the enemy. And since he's a beast unit, he worked great against horseback units, so if there was ever a choke point of mounted units coming through, Keaton was my go-to guy to hold down the point with Corin, because there's nothing cooler than seeing a wolf monster and a dragon fighting side by side. Keaton wasn't perfect however, since like most beast units, he didn't fare too well against mages because of his low resistance and inability to use ranged attacks. Keaton also had rather low skill, which usually wasn't a problem when dealing with the majority of units, but I won't lie, there were times where Keaton would miss an attack because of his low skill, making him a rather chapter dependent unit depending on the majority of classes I was facing at the time. With all that said, Keaton was still an awesome unit on my team and an absolute beast against most physical units. Sure, he couldn't do much to mages, but that's not what he was used for, and Keaton himself was a fun character that I enjoyed getting to know. Though I find it funny, Keaton's reluctant and sensitive attitude despite trying to come off as cool reminded me of how Severa was in her supports and... wait a second. Oh my god! Keaton's a fucking tsundere! Fire Emblem is home to a huge cast of characters, all of which have their own unique and distinct personalities. Now while most of these characters are genuinely nice people, some characters aren't exactly the most pleasant beings in the world and others are just straight up dicks. Now while this is true for certain characters, sometimes there's a reason as to why they are the way they are, as is the case with number 8 on this list, Niles. I must say Niles, I think you embodied what most people thought the majority of units were going to be like in Conquest. Now granted, anyone who's played Fire Emblem knows that there's always a sense of moral grey when it comes to the story and characters. Well, most of the time. But since Conquest has you playing as the quote-unquote bad guys, you'd expect the Nohr characters to be a bit more cruel and mean-spirited than normal. While Niles certainly embodies this to a T, since Niles is one of the more cold and callous characters in the Fire Emblem series, but not without reason since he's one of the more complex characters in Conquest, as well as being a pretty good archer in his own right. Niles first appears in Chapter 8 of Conquest as one of Leo's retainers, alongside Odin, as they were sent by Leo to help out Corrin. Niles himself is a very sadistic and rather depressing character, as he often delights in seeing people suffer and has no qualms about speaking the truth and saying what needs to be said no matter how harsh it may be. I get the feeling Seren and Niles should hang out sometime. Now despite this, Niles isn't a dick for the sake of being a dick. That award already goes to Jared from Radiant Dawn, since Niles from a very young age was abandoned by both his parents and ended up joining a gang of thieves, until they used him as a scapegoat when caught by Nohrian guards. But Leo spared him and made him his retainer because he saw potential in him. Because of this, Niles is very pessimistic towards people, especially those who've had it easy compared to his upbringing, and this is shown in his supports as he often calls people out on being pathetic and not knowing what true pain is, as well as not holding back on the insults and quips. But also through his supports, he learns not to judge people so callously and see them in a different light, a good example being his support with Camilla. Gameplay wise, Niles is overall pretty good. Not the best unit on my team or archer in the Fire Emblem series, but certainly not the worst. Being an archer, Niles has very good speed and good resistance too. His strength and skill are decent, and overall Niles is a pretty good unit. He is lacking in the luck and defense department, but that's not too big of an issue since you get him rather early in the game and he can be trained up to be very potent throughout the majority of the game. And Niles is a unit I feel can work in just about any chapter regardless of the map or enemies. Sometimes there's more to people than meets the eye, especially when they come off as stuck up assholes. Niles is certainly one of those people since despite coming off as a dickhead, he's actually rather sympathetic and a complex character who really benefits by supporting with other characters, as well as being an overall solid unit on the battlefield. Though I must say, I really wish they stuck with Niles' original Japanese name. I mean, come on, Zero sounds so much cooler. You remember how I said appearances can be deceiving? Well, number 7 on this list is yet another character who at first seems just so cute and lovely, almost like an adorable little doll or even bridesmaid, but in reality she's a complete nutjob, who delights in killing for just about any reason and is an emotional train wreck. Well, if that doesn't scream yandere, I don't know what does, because at number 7 we have the one and only Perry. You know, the more that I think about it, Perry really shouldn't be on this list, let alone this high up in the rankings, since she has a lot of character traits which I don't like in Fire Emblem characters. For one thing, she's a semi-late game unit that you get, who at first isn't too spectacular, and is outclassed by 2 other units of the same class. Plus, Perry herself is kind of fucked up, since she delights in killing at the snap of a finger, and does it without thinking twice or having any remorse. Yet for some reason, that sick side of me can't help but admire Perry, and she herself turned out to be one of the most potent units on my team despite being a late-ish game cavalier. Perry first appears in Chapter 12 of Conquest as one of Xander's retainers alongside Laszlo. I'm starting to sense a pattern here. Anyway, from the get-go, Perry is a very unique character, since she has the appearance and attitude of someone who's very childlike and innocent, and she seems like a lovely young lady at first. But once you get to know her, suddenly you start to question what is real anymore, since Perry delights in killing people and does it without thinking twice, often being so happy and chipper about it, and talking about it so casually to others. While she may seem otherwise crazy at first, her supporters explain that her mother was killed by one of her servants, and well, let's just say that particular incident had a lasting effect on her, since she still somewhat has the mind of a child and has random outbursts with the intent on dismembering people. But Perry isn't simply blood and guts, since she is shown to be an expert cook and makes food that many other characters like Hayes absolutely adore, making Perry a very standout and fun character at the very least. Gameplay wise, Perry was the very essence of a true cavalier, in the sense that Perry wasn't a unit who could dominate any situation, but at the same time Perry had no major weaknesses and was incredibly reliable throughout the game, despite her joining later than most characters. Being a cavalier, Perry was a very well-rounded unit, along with her stats and growth rates being solid across the board, with both strength and speed being her best stats and HP and defense being her worst stats aside from magic. As such, Perry was a unit I could use in just about any situation to either lead the charge, support other units or tank the enemy, and this was made even better when she became a Great Knight, making up for her low HP and strength. Originally I was going to make her a paladin, but then I remembered I had Xander, and well, it's fucking Xander. Despite being quite the Fire Emblem oddball, Perry was a character I'm glad I stuck with, since she was a very fun and likeable character even though she really shouldn't be, and she was an essential member of my team. Though with Perry around, I did worry for Felicia's safety. I mean, Perry killed many servants and maids before, I wouldn't put it past her to add one more to the pile, 3 if you count Jacob and Flora. You remember how I said looks can be deceiving? What am I talking about? Of course you do, this is the 3rd time I've mentioned it. Well, for number 6 on this list, this character at a first glance acts just so sweet and lovely, almost like she was a Barbie doll or little princess, when in actuality this person is brutal, hot-blooded and lives for fighting. Man, Fates really likes having female characters who act completely different to how they appear on the surface, because at number 6 we have the beautiful berserker, Charlotte. Now this is the type of character you really can't judge based on appearances, because at first I didn't think much of Charlotte in terms of both character and gameplay, so I was ready to dismiss her almost instantly. But I decided to give her a chance and used her for a few chapters to see what she was like and how well she fared on the battlefield. And hot damn am I ever glad that I did, because not only is Charlotte a very good character with some genuinely beautiful support, but holy shit, she is a literal monster on the battlefield, more so than any other unit in just about any Fire Emblem game. Charlotte first appeared in chapter 13 of Conquest alongside Benny the Knight, where she stumbles upon Corin and the group and decides to join him after learning he's a prince. Charlotte on the surface acts like a sweet, cordial and dainty girl around most men in order to attract their attention, along with her massive cleavage and pretty raunchy design. I mean, people complain about Camilla looking too sexualized. I'm sorry, but I think Charlotte's much worse. However, in reality, she loves to fight and is rather brutal at hand-to-hand fighting. The reason she puts on this facade is that she grew up as a peasant and wants to send money back to her parents. As such, she acts sweet and dainty in the hopes of one day landing a rich nobleman to provide for her family. Her support reveals to the others her true self, as well as helping her to come to grips with being her true self instead of constantly trying to be something she's not. In particular, her support with Xander, where he instantly sees through her ruse and helps her to come to terms with being proud of who she is, not ashamed of it. Gameplay-wise, Charlotte was our 100% pure berserker through and through, as her stats and growth rates exemplified both the best and worst aspects of the berserker class, which usually isn't something I'm down with, but in the case of Charlotte, it made her one of the most potent units on my team and someone who could take out the toughest of enemies no problem whatsoever. Being a warrior, Charlotte has very high levels of HP, strength and speed, allowing her to deal massive amounts of damage and double the enemies easily. She also has decent skill and luck, but her defense and resistance are piss poor, making it so that she cannot tank multiple enemies and struggles greatly against enemies she has a clear disadvantage against. So Charlotte is rather situational, but very potent when the conditions are set in her favour, especially against knights and generals. Oh man, did she kick the shit out of those guys. Charlotte, despite being someone I wasn't too keen on at first, grew on me very quickly and became one of my favourite characters from Nohr, being an awesome unit and a very likeable and interesting character, and being yet another character that is completely different to how they appear at a first glance, because apparently the message about what matters on the inside wasn't clear at this point. So now we're at the number 5 spot, and I think it's time we talked about the Nohr royal family. I must say, Conquest, you did a great job with these characters, as each of them are interesting, unique, well developed, have brilliant supports, are awesome units on the battlefield, and really helped emphasize the idea of moral growth throughout the story. And to begin with, we have the youngest of the siblings, the lovely little Princess Elise. Oh, I swear the cuteness level is just too much for me right now. I've made it no secret in the past that I'm a sucker for adorableness, and while Elise is so damn cute and lovely, I couldn't help but admire her. But even without the top tier cuteness on her side, Elise is still a really good character that is interesting and helps to portray Nohr in a more bright light, as well as being a very useful unit on the battlefield. Elise is the youngest of the Nohr siblings and appears at the very beginning of the game but doesn't become a team member until Chapter 7. Elise is very much the baby of the group as she is very cheerful, optimistic, sweet, playful and rather naive. But being part of the Nohr royal family, she is very courageous and selfless, and she knows exactly how to act in certain situations, showing that she is rather mature for her age. Elise loves her siblings and those around her greatly, and her supports are some of the best I've seen in the game so far, in particular with Effie and Azora, showing Elise's loving nature and how she doesn't care about background or social standing, but rather accepts people for who they are and is willing to embrace other cultures and customs in order to understand them more and hopefully bring the two kingdoms together. Elincia would be proud, dear child. Gameplay wise, Elise was a great support unit and was able to help out my team in even the most dire of circumstances, which Conquest was filled to the brim with. Being a troubadour, Elise has some very impressive luck, magic, speed and resistance stats. Naturally her physical stats are poor, but that's to be expected from this class. Elise was great from the moment I started playing, since she was able to freeze Ryoma in place during Chapter 6 before I even properly recruited her, and once I upgraded her at level 10, which is something I do with all my Fire Emblem medics, she became a strategist and was able to dish out the pain and support her allies. While my quote-unquote least favourite of the Nohr royal family, Elise was still a lovely character and a great unit on the battlefield, as well as being a beacon of hope in the story about war, death and heartbreaking choices. And now I'm really not looking forward to Birthright, because for the love of God, I don't want to fight little Elise. I could never live with myself if I did. Remember how I said Dark Knights were one of my least favourite classes in the Fire Emblem series? Yeah, well I may have to retract that statement since number 4 in this list is a kick-ass Dark Knight and one of the best units on my team, as well as being one of the most complex and interesting characters in Conquest. Yes, at number 4 we have the magnificent mastermind, Leo. Ah, Leo, you are by far the character that surprised me the most based on my expectations of you. Since based on the trailers and Nintendo Directs I saw, I always got the feeling Leo was going to be a bit of a douche and a stick in the mud of the family. Once I finally got to play the game, I am so sorry I ever doubted you, Leo, because not only are you such a great character and one of the most interesting characters in the entire Fire Emblem series, but you're also a kick-ass unit and easily the best Dark Knight in the entire Fire Emblem series. Which kind of isn't saying much since I wasn't the biggest fan of Dark Knights, but you're awesome regardless. Leo, like Elise, appeared at the beginning of the game but didn't become fully recruitable until Chapter 14. Leo from the get-go is a very calculating and sharp-minded individual and is often seen as one of the smartest minds in the entire kingdom of Nohr, which paints him as someone who's rather cold and bitter. But in actuality, Leo is a rather easygoing guy and genuinely friendly and understanding. I mean, yeah, he won't embrace you the way Camilla does, but he won't just toss you aside either, since he gets along with all the siblings and members of the army rather well, and much like Corrin, he feels that killing innocents is not the right way, and only acts the way his father wants him to in order to avoid suspicion as he goes behind Gowron's back to resolve conflicts his own way, which helps to make Leo one of the more interesting and smartest characters in the series, as he knows how to make the situation favour him, but also understands when some situations can't be helped. Despite this, Leo feels he is underappreciated, and this is evident in his support, as he often feels that both Xander and Camilla pay more attention to Corrin and Elise than him, and that he doesn't live up to their expectations, but soon understands that both Camilla and Xander love him just as much as both Corrin and Elise, and don't shower him with as much affection in order for him to focus on what he does best and be free to do as he pleases. Gameplay wise, Leo is a kick-ass Dark Knight and one of the best magical units in the game, as well as being an incredibly reliable unit that should be with you in just about every battle. Leo has overall balanced stats across the board, excelling in magic, HP, and pretty much solid in everything else. Like Perry, Leo isn't a unit that can destroy or dominate certain classes, but he can hold his own against just about anyone and is a very reliable unit throughout the entire game. This makes Leo work as an attacking, defending and supporting unit and should be used very often when pairing up characters in order to help boost what they do best. While I thought I was going to hate Leo at first, I'm very glad that Leo shattered my expectations because he truly is a great character and a really good unit. While not the best unit on my team, he was someone I simply couldn't do without, and was by far one of the most interesting characters I've had the pleasure of seeing in just about any Fire Emblem game. And that is saying a lot. I've stated that Knights or Generals are my favourite class in the Fire Emblem series, and thanks to Fates, I have yet another reason for them to stay on the pedestal which I have given them, because number 3 on this list is one of the best Generals I've used in any Fire Emblem game, and considering I've had the pleasure of using Kashiel, Oswin, Gatry and Gilliam, that's one hell of an accomplishment. But Effie, you've certainly earned it. You know how in every Fire Emblem game there's that one unit you get at the very beginning and stays with you throughout the entire series because they're just so damn good, and I'm not talking about the Paladins. Well, for Conquest, that unit was Effie, since she was such a great unit outside of the fact that she was a knight, and she turned out to be a very likeable character with some very strong support. And overall, Effie is my favourite non-royal Conquest unit. Effie first appears in Chapter 7 of Conquest and is released as Athena alongside Arthur. Hey, look at that! A Fates retainer that isn't just an Awakening character with a different name. Who would have thought? Anyway, Effie, being a knight, dedicates herself to training and making herself as strong as possible and pushing herself to exceed her limits at all times. I get the feeling she got her training regime from Kashiel. As such, Effie is very protective of her comrades, in particular Elise, and often acts rather recklessly in order to keep them safe regardless of her safety. Effie also has strange eating habits, as she often eats enough food to feed about 12 people and is never really full since she burns it off training. Are Effie and Ileana related perchance? Effie's supports help to flesh out her backstory and how she became a knight in order to serve Elise after they played together as children, as well as addressing her reckless behaviour and self-sacrificing nature in order to show Effie that she is important to others and shouldn't risk her life so carelessly. Gameplay wise, I'm just going to come out and say it. Effie was the best unit on my team, bar none. I mean, yes, other units were great too, and we've got 2 other entries that are better than Effie overall, but when it came down to getting through Conquest and being the unit that was the most useful, Effie took that title by storm. In terms of stats and growth rates, Effie, being a knight, excelled in defense, HP, luck, and holy crap did she have some ridiculous strength, often being able to one-shot units with so much as a javelin. Her speed and skill were rather solid, and though she had poor resistance, it didn't matter in the grand scheme of things, since Effie could tank literally any physical unit and one-shot any mages that attacked her. As such, Effie was essential in leading the charge against the enemy and holding down choke points in just about every chapter, and since she was with me from the beginning, Effie was present in every single chapter in Conquest. Knight in Fire Emblem are and pretty much will always be my favourite class in the series, and Effie is yet another reason as to why I love this class so much. Being a great character and the best unit in Conquest, Effie, all of your hard work and training has paid off, because you are officially my second favourite knight in the Fire Emblem series, and considering that number 1 is Gilliam, that is something you can be proud of, my dear. Okay, so there's only 2 entries left, and as you may have guessed, the final 2 characters on this list are both Camilla and Xander. Both of these characters are wonderful characters, very interesting, complex, fleshed out, have fantastic supports, and are some of the best units on the battlefield and in their respective classes. But which of the 2 is better? You know what? Neither of them are better than the other. To me, they're both as good as each other, and because this is my list and I can't decide between the 2, number 2, or in this case number 1 on this list, goes to both Camilla and Xander. Brilliant. Honestly, if I could describe both of these 2 in just one word, it would be brilliant. I mean, holy shit, both Xander and Camilla were not only my favourite characters from Conquest, and at this point I wouldn't be surprised if they became my favourite characters in Fates, but it's still early days at this point, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. But they've become some of my favourite Fire Emblem characters, and in such a short amount of time that they've reached Sumia and the Black Knight levels of favouritism, and for fuck's sake, this guy just won't go away when I make countdowns. Well, there's quite a bit of discuss with these 2 characters, and since there's the time-old saying of ladies first, let's talk about Xander. Xander is the eldest of the Nohr royal family and the Crown Prince of Nohr, who appears at the very beginning and is recruited at chapter 16. Being the Prince of Nohr, Xander is a pristine leader and masterful fighter, as he shoulders the responsibility of leading a kingdom and does his best to fulfill his father's wishes despite being against them most of the time. Xander is rather stern and strict and has a deep loyalty to his country, which at times can cloud his judgment and make him somewhat stubborn. For the most part, Xander is an even-tempered individual who feels that diplomacy should always be used instead of violence, showing that he has a sense of beliefs and morals despite the actions he performs. Xander also cares deeply for his family, as he cherishes them more than anything and always looks out for them and supporting them whenever he can. His supports help to emphasize his character traits, as his support with Charlotte has him scolded for putting on fast to get attention, but then assures her that she shouldn't be ashamed of who she really is, and in his support with Camilla, he explains that he knows loads about each of the siblings and what they're like, but distances himself as he has the responsibility of ruling a kingdom on his shoulders, but never forgets what matters most. Gameplay-wise, Xander being a paladin is easily the most reliable unit in the game and someone who was essential for every chapter he was available in. Despite being a very late game unit compared to most of the others, Xander was already strong enough to take on just about anyone and still grow stronger throughout the rest of the game. Xander is a very well-rounded unit in all stats aside from resistance and has surprisingly good luck, making him a very reliable unit and someone who always gets the job done. And thanks to his signature weapon Siegfried, which by the way is a fucking awesome weapon, Xander can beat the shit out of just about anyone and was one of the best units on my team. Well, enough about Xander, now it's time for Camilla, the second eldest of the Nohr royal family, who appears at the very beginning and is recruited in chapter 10, thank fucking god! Camilla can best be described as the mother of the group, as she is very warm and caring towards her siblings and just about every member of the army in general, as she often showers them in love and affection and does whatever she can to keep them safe, even if it means going slightly bloodthirsty and killing others while enjoying it at the same time. Camilla is both very sweet and a very sadistic character, since most of the time she's someone who is gentle, kind and slightly obsessive over others' well-being, and other times she is ruthless, sadistic and has a very dark sense of humour, especially when her family is threatened, because you know what they say, threaten the child and the mother, or in this case sister, goes apeshit. Camilla's supports help to shed light on her backstory, as she was only used as a pawn by her mother and knows what it's like to be alone and unwanted, which is why she acts so motherly towards the others, since she feels they do not deserve that type of suffering and loneliness. And in her other supports, like with Kay's, she likes to bring out the best aspects of people and is a very open-minded person, which is something I respect greatly. In fact, if you were following me on Twitter, you would know that Camilla was my wife in that game, which wasn't an easy choice mind you, since I had A supports for both Azura and Felicia at the time as well. Gameplay wise, Camilla, like Xander, was one of the most reliable units in the game and one of the best units on my team, as being the overall most helpful unit in my team, as she was the one who took down most of the bosses and got me out of the most difficult situations, especially in the case of chapter 10. Stat wise, being a Malignite, Camilla has very balanced stats across the board aside from luck, and tends to do well in skill, speed, strength and resistance, making her a unit that can take on just about anyone. This is also helped by the fact that because she is a Malignite, she can use both axes and magic, giving her massive amounts of versatility and allowing her to adapt to just about any situational enemy. No matter the chapter or victory conditions, Camilla was someone I could always rely on to assure me victory. And there you have it. Both Camilla and Xander are my favourite characters from Fire Emblem Fates Conquest. Both of them are just as good as each other, and by themselves they're fantastic characters and amazing units on the battlefield, as well as being some of the best units in their respective classes, since now I'm contemplating whether Seth is still my favourite paladin, and Camilla is officially my second favourite Wyvern unit. Sorry honey, as much as I love you, Jill is a god tier Wyvern Lord. But regardless, Camilla, Xander, I love you both, which is why both of you take the number one spot of my favourite Nohr characters from Fire Emblem Fates. This has been CRASHX500. I wish you all a great night, take care, and now that Conquest is out of the way, it's time to see what Birthright has to offer. And oh boy, you've got quite the hurdle to jump over, Hoshido, because when it comes to exclusive characters, Conquest set the bar pretty damn high.